and welcome to Abnormal Presence Touring Talkies. I'm Kamla Iyer. Today, our Sari-torial Safar takes us to Bengal, the land of fine muslins and silks. Jamdanis, Tant, Tangel, Baluchari, Swarnachari, Batik, Kantha, the list is endless. Bengal is a sari voyager's delight and may take more than a few episodes to be able to cover the vast textile tradition of Bengal. Our guest today is Darshan Shah, who owns Weaver's Studio in Kolkata. She's a textile entrepreneur who chanced upon the business of textiles 28 years ago, almost by accident. Darshan's story is hugely inspirational because she discovered her passion or her calling for textiles surely by accident born out of necessity. She's not from the world of textiles, either academically or from a family background. A single mother who had to fend for herself and her child and explore possibilities of earning a living. Darshan was bored with a regular job and tuitions and needed a challenge. And she found herself organizing and curating exhibitions with textiles and crafts. And soon, the success of this exhibition led to many more such exhibitions in metro cities, which gave her a chance to travel and interact with many people from the world of arts, crafts, and textiles. Success encouraged her to make investments of her time, energy, and resources into what she discovered as her calling, textiles. And in December 1993, she gifted herself the Weaver's Studio. It's my great privilege to invite Darshan to speak to us in my show today. Thank you very much, Darshan, for joining us in our show today. It's been such a pleasure to interact with you even before this show. So I'm kind of very looking forward to my chat with you. So welcome to my show on Know Your Weaves of Bengal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for calling me and inviting me to be on the show because I have to be, you had to really push me to do it, but I love the fact that I'm here now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the time. So Darshan, before I even start and embark on Bengal and the rich history of Bengal, can you tell us a bit about what Weaver Studio is all about, and how did you kind of start this journey? Could you give us a bit of introduction on what Weaver Studios does?
Sure. Actually, I was born and brought up in Kolkata, but having been educated in La Martiniere and then Calcutta University, I got married and went to Mumbai and studied law, and then went to a management school in Ahmedabad. Came back to Mumbai and had a child, a beautiful daughter called Radhika, who is married and lives in Bangalore now. And I was separated within 6 months of her being born. And one's journey was that was exploring and trying to find my calling. And I just came back to Kolkata to where my parents used to live, because that was a fantastic support system with a 6-month-old child. So it just organically happened that I got into, I was invited by friends who had made along the way, who said, why don't you put together some nice exhibitions, So from Archana Shah of Bandej, who really supported me in the initial times, to Pradeep and Mala at Bodhi in Baroda, to Sally Holker and Richard Holker with Reva, to many, many such organizations which were young and upcoming, and their things I was always attracted to. So I realized that I was always attracted to natural dyes, organic, hand woven, women centric, etc., etc. That was something that just happened to me, just the fact that I was getting attracted to such things. So I presented these kind of exhibitions, but I curated them very well. What you call today, people have started taking on multi-designer and multi kind of product exhibitions. I would do that in a very organic manner in those days, where all the products I brought in, whether it was Shamauja Daris, or I brought in the bandage clothes, or I brought in an Ajrak person, or I brought in a stained glass or a terracotta person, they all were complementary to each other, and they were not a competition to each other. So if somebody was coming in to pick up a sari, would pick up a handmade paper product, might pick up a dari. So it was all happened very organically. Then suddenly I was told that, okay, with our leftover stock, why don't you, with Bengal being so rich in its textile culture and its art and craft culture, why don't you block print or do some katha embroidery or do some batik and value add it and send it back to us? So that's how I started getting into these little collections, and went around exploring where I could do what I could do on the weekends, because right through the week one was busy working with my cousin and my brother who had the agency for Apple computers, and doing tuitions and looking after the kids. So it was like I was all over the place. And slowly, I think that roti, kapda, or makan hota hai, and then one realized that kapda is the most easy to kind of handle in terms of handling breakage, time, demand, all of it. So I got a 200 square feet small office space within the larger office of my brother, and started Weaver Studio. I gave it as a gift to myself on 7th of December 1993, and that's how Weaver Studio started. So that was the very beginning of the journey. And then, I've never borrowed from the bank. I've never borrowed from anybody, and it grew organically. I kept having many mentors and many very wonderful people who were a part of this fantastic journey, who taught me natural dyes. My guru, Ruby Ghaznavi, to Sheila Balaji, taught me how to use the natural dyes, how to specialize in it. I traveled to Indonesia, then I traveled to Japan. And when I reached Japan, I connected the moment I landed. There was something that I connected with in that country, which was like pulling me to it year on year on year. And so over a period of the last 20 years, my largest export market has been Japan. And my largest influence in international textiles has been Japan. So that's how we grew organically. And I started a production unit. From the production unit, one went to consolidate for 2 years before again expanding, then getting the store to be a 2,000 square feet space, then getting the factory to be a 30,000 square feet space. And so it was just rolling. I was on the roll, as one would say. And I kept learning, kept collecting, kept reading, kept researching, visiting museums, making friends with curators. And I was just hungry for knowledge. And till I understood the subject, it hadn't become a passion. For me, initially, it was just a pure business. Then over a period of time, as you keep on doing the same thing, and you look more deeper into this entire thing of historical to archival to contemporary to the colonization to the whole rich gamut of the story, the narrative, then one realizes the material history, the iconographic references, the social political impact, the economic impact. I was a student of history at one time, and I got this opportunity once again to leave behind numbers and to get into the real touch, feel, and connect. So for me, it was a very, very beautiful organic growth. And I was really fortunate to be in a city like Kolkata, which is besides being the city of joy and falling bridges, it's also a place where culturally I was really, egged on and very excited and always a part of it. So the growth was all around. It was holistic. So whether I went to Shantiniketan to look at the Mela and find people to do Katha or to do Batik, or I went to a village elsewhere in Barasat, or I went to Bangladesh, I never understood in my head why we had these borders. So it was always for me beyond borders. I find that these political little lines drawn here and there just made no sense to me, whether I went to the Northeast or whether I went to Bangladesh or whether I went to Indonesia, or whether I went to Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and Japan. I just found that the people who were involved in textiles had their own language. They did not have a language which was dependent on who the prime minister of the country was, or who the president of the country was, or who the political leaders were. So I found that also a fascinating part of my journey, where everybody, wherever I went, shared because they cared, because they connected, because it was that one subject of textile. And then, of course, the aesthetics, the techniques, the honing of the skills, everything happened slowly and gradually. And I had a fantastic team. So maybe I was very lucky to have a fantastic team of people. And they were with me for almost 23, 24 years. Only in recent times, everybody's moved on to start their own businesses and become entrepreneurs. And one is also downsizing. So that's been the journey so far.
So fabulous to hear that, Darshan. I mean, yours is a very inspiring story, it kind of gives people hope that if you have passion and you kind of chase it no matter what, and at the same time you had you started this, as you said, born out of necessity. So it
Yeah.
started from necessity, then it became, you got your calling, you started chasing it. It's a very, very inspiring story indeed. And like you said, Kolkata is, a city of joy and the right place to be in for textiles, because it's a veritable ocean of textile tradition. So it kind of gives me a naturally beautiful segue into my next question as to, I know one episode or a few episodes will not do justice to Bengal because it's so huge. So could you kind of give us a rough idea or a rough sketch of what is the landscape in Bengal from a textile tradition standpoint?
Yeah, it has a really, really old textile tradition from what I've started to understand and read and be with scholars and get to go to libraries like the National Library and the State Archives and all of it. I've had the fortune of being connected with people who have been intensely in the field of history and research. And one goes back to maybe 2000 years ago, when there were writings and documentation of how the Muslims from Bengal emptied the coffers of Rome, and how one understands that in those times how enterprising the Bengali businessmen were, the zamindars were, and the trade and history was. So if you go back and see whether it was the muslins and the jamdanis, which were the earlier textiles, to the tangal, which is the Tangal textile, which was normally the warp was silk and the weft was cotton, and the village of Tangal is now in Bangladesh. But the Tangal sari has been popularized in Bengal post 1971 because lots of the weavers moved to the side. Most of the GI and other things that have come in have also been there's been a lot of back and forth in terms of who does the Jamdani really belong to. Was it in Lucknow and Tanda that we did it, to Bengal, to Bangladesh? So like I said, these political borders are there, but for me it really doesn't matter, because I've had the fortune to work with weavers on 300 counts once again in Bangladesh, because there they don't have the yarn. So we spin the yarn in West Bengal, but we weave it in Bangladesh, because the master weavers and the master designs in their heads are incredible. The balance, the graph, they don't need anything. So if we talk about all of that, then we talk about Katha. Katha was a rural craft. It was a folk craft. And it happened all over, the whole of Bangladesh, the whole of Bengal and Bihar. So you call it Sujni in Bihar. You call it Nakshi Katha in Bangladesh. You call it Katha in Bengal. And there are various kinds of Katha that there are there. And we have the most fantastic examples at the Guru Sadeh Dutt Museum. We have the most fantastic examples all over the world where people have taken Katha from here. The colonies, the Americans, the Japanese, it's everywhere. It's a craft which was from like waste to wealth. Today we talk about all these jargons, waste to wealth. This was the old dhotis and saris that women kind of layered together. The village women, when it was torn, they layered together and they quilted it. And the thread came out of the borders, the woven borders of the saris. So can you imagine using up every single thing that was there in that fabric? After wearing it, using it, washing it, whatever, they made it into quilts, or they made it into different small items depending on the size they could take out and embroider, and it made it into different usable, wearable, usable pieces. So whether it was a lep katha which you put on yourself, or the arshilata, or the one that you put on a bedspread, or the one that you put on a dressing table, or the dastarka which you covered a thala with, or a book cover. There were so many ways to use katha, and the grandmother and the mother would make it to give it to the daughter for some time when she was going to get married, and the daughter also learned to do it. So whether we talk about all of that, or whether we talk about the Baluchari tradition, which disappeared completely. Dubraj was one of the last master weavers in 1903 who knew how to use the jala. It came back and was set up from the time it was in Baluchar, when the river changed course. It came back to be in Bishnupur. And here it was into the jacquard system, into the carding system, into a completely different system where even the designs were changed. So there was no references left, because everything must have submerged underwater. And Indians were never good at any documentation. So today also, whenever we want to look at things, or we want to look at archival material or documentation, we go to the foreign museums. We go to a V&A, a British Museum, a Met, Peabody, or Washington, DC, etc., etc. So we still have to go back to those museums because their documentation was fantastic. So because of lack of designs, it came up in Bishnupur, and in Bishnupur, it turned completely different. So that story will come to later. So these are the basic textiles. Then of course you have the Lalpar Shadi, the Garod you have the Dhone Khali, you have in the Murshidabad area, the Murshidabad Butidar saris, you have the Khadi and the muslin being woven in the Kalna area, which is absolutely on the border of Bangladesh. And then like that, you have so many textiles of Bengal, which is incredible that the number of textiles that we have is the repertoire is fantastic. It attracted like 25, 30 years ago, it attracted the Japanese, it attracted the Americans, it attracted the British, it attracted the Indian people who were in Delhi, Bombay, other places to come and explore a village like Fulia, Shantipur, and establish their businesses based on the simple gamcha that the rickshawala wore, or the jamdani, or the cottons, or the khadi. So all of it was developed, and all these little places, these villages were, at these weaving centers were developed, not only locally, but by international designers. That's the reason it caught so much attention in the late 90s and early 2000, and it became such a hub for every single person to visit. So if you were an academician, you were an historian, you were a designer, Bengal was the place to come to find those answers, to find those textiles, to find that history, to find those connections, to understand where it came from, how it came from. And of course, the technical knowledge and the expertise was beyond imagination of anybody. For example, in those days, there would be saris that, Vidyasagar came up with the thing that, these are little anecdotes. So Vidyasagar came up with the thing of a child and widow remarriage. So they would weave in Shantipur and other places, they would weave saris where they put in the calligraphy. So they would say, long live Vidyasagar, but in the Bengali language, or they would put Vande Mataram when the Quit India movement started, or like the first flag of India, woven in Khadi, was woven in Shantipur and is at the Shantipur Museum. And there are so many stories that Bengal has from not only the Khadi, the Kantha, the Jamdani, and the Baluchar and various textiles, but much, much beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, Bengal almost is self-sufficient in its textiles, right? Whether it's the cottons, the beautiful silks, the Baluchars, as you rightly said. Yeah. I mean, it's so beautiful, and it kind of brings me nicely into the next question, because I've read, somewhere, I think it was your interview only, which said that, for a region so rich in its textiles, it was sad that the Bengali brides were wearing, Banarasis and things like that for their wedding, Kanjivarams even, as opposed to wearing the rich and beautiful Baluchar. So Baluchar is rightly described as the woven narrative in silks, right? Yes. And you've done extensive work on its revival, research, documentation.
That's one of our publications.
Yes,
I still keep reading it and marking it. I still have my little markings. So
yes,
we published it with it's a pleasure for me to send it across to you.
I really
want to. Before that, we had even done another exhibition catalog, which was a very beautifully made catalog on the Baluchars. Okay. And this was done by Mayank Mansingh Kaul, and you can see the fabulous production and quality of this. So these were all research and all the papers that were presented at the seminar and various interviews, and it was very interesting to have a first publication which kind of explored just the texture and the history and all in a very easy narrative manner to get interest, so that it would not be too heavy. But then when we were invited to the National Museum to present, then it became like we had to come up with a solid publication with research and experts and what really went into that entire Baluchar, the tradition and the textile.
So over time, this woven narrative seemed to have lost its raconteur. So can you tell us, since you've done so much work on it, what were the original, when it was in Baluchar?
Baluchar is very much here. It's in Murshidabad district, but it moved because of the fact that the river moved course. And so the Baluchar went underwater, and then it was rediscovered, and it came up to start weaving from the Jala weaving. It's come into the Jacquard weaving in Bishnupur.
Okay.
So that's also...
you said we've lost a lot of, we don't document, we've lost a lot of,
design.
Tradition and history. So, from your research, what did you find was the earliest, motifs, or how was Baluchar originally woven? How was it changed over time?
Yeah, actually, Baluchar was woven probably it started being woven, I think, around 1800s is it's not very, very old. It's about 250 years old, or 300 to the max, 250, I would say. But I wouldn't be able to pinpoint exactly. But when I went to Bombay, I saw a fabulous exhibition and a book called Sahib Bibi or Nawab, which was published by the Tapi collection. And the Tapi collection was being displayed at the Prince of Wales Museum. And it was fascinating for me to see these kind of baluchas, which I had seen a couple in Bengal at the Indian Museum, and I'd seen some which were in the National Museum. I think I'd seen a couple, and I'd seen some at the Craft Museum, and I'd seen one or two at the Sanskriti Museum, but in Bengal and at the Indian Museum in Kolkata. But one had not seen such a collection, and we said, I've never seen this in the market. I'd already been in the retail business long enough. And I was saying that how come I don't see anything like this? Just then my daughter's wedding was coming up, and I wanted to collect 20 to 25 saris from all India, one from each state kind of thing, or each technique. And I started looking for the Baluchar. I went from Bada Bazaar to South Calcutta to all the old shops to everywhere, from an Ananda to Indian textiles to everywhere. And I found that all the Baluchars that I was looking at had basically Ramayan, Mahabharata, Shakuntala, and these kind of themes. I didn't see anything that was related to the iconography design that I saw in the museum collections. So obviously there was a large gap in what I saw in those days of that I saw in museums and what I saw in the local markets. So I said there was something there was a gap, And where was this gap? So I took a train and I went to Bishnupur. And I went around and met all the weavers, and I asked them and I spoke to them. And he said, but we don't design. And I took an old sari, which was there with me in my archives. And I took other images. And I took the Sahib Bibi book. And they said, but we've never seen this. We've never been exposed to this. We don't know what you're talking about. Except for one or two weaver families who were very old families, and the lady would came up and said, "Hi, I know about it, or I've seen it, or it's been there in our family." The weather in our country is such that it's difficult to look after textiles that are just folded or lying around, because they just break or crack or tear or whatever. So I found that none of these people had ever, they didn't relate to what I showed them, So then I came back and met people at Weaver Service Center. I tried to go and meet the people at the government level and said that I'm very interested to revisit this tradition. And then I met Ruby Pal Chaudhary, and she told me that they had tried, and Pupul Jaikar and Jasleen Dhamija, and they had come to, and Kamla Devi and all had come before the Festival of India when they were commissioning textiles all over India. They had come to Bengal and they'd been to Bishnupur, but somehow these designs just didn't happen, because when Dubraj passed away in 1903, the main Jala technique was lost. So getting to do this kind of work, there are two types of work, Chalani and Golani. So Chalani is when the threads at the back are there, and they haven't been cut like you have in Banaras. Yeah. And the Golani is when the threads are interlocked so that they don't catch in your bangle or watch or anywhere, and that's a higher technique and a better technique, but it requires much more skill and many more cards. And each card in a good baluchar, a good well-designed traditional baluchar, you need anything between 25 and 30,000 cards. So each card, even if you say is 5 rupees, who would invest 1.5 lakhs or 1,25,000 to weave that sari, which they don't know who will find the market or how many numbers? Though the cards can be used for 30, 40, 50 years. But you see, nobody had really worked on it, or the figures or the logistics or the business part of it, or how to revive it, or how to get support, or any of it. So I'm not such a technical person, as I'm more of a person who's interested, passionate, but I had to learn. I had to start learning. I realized that unless I learn, I won't be able to communicate my language and what I need. So that's how I started to research Baluchar. That's how I put together my project. I booked the Birla Academy. I started talking to various people. I brought Mayank Mansingh Kaul, who was extremely helpful and well connected and passionate himself about doing something like this. And that's how we just started doing everything in Kolkata. We had not even gone out anywhere. And when we went to different people, old Bengali homes and ladies who have been wearing these kind of, traditional beautiful saris, everybody opened their wardrobes. Everybody said, yeah, this is what we have. This is what we have. And that's how we found 100 years, last 70, 80 years of Baluchars, which were in a good condition, which we could show. And then we had Tapi, who was so generous as to lend those textiles of their collection. And then we had people like Siddharth Tagore, and we had lots of other people who from Jharna Bose to Ruby Pal Chaudhary to everybody who was so generous with the information and sharing that we managed to put together this fantastic exhibition at the Birla Academy, who were also very supportive, and to show a contemporary part also of what one could do with the traditional textiles to attract the next generation. So every single designer, from a Rahul Mishra to a Rajesh Pratap to Anamika Khanna to Devar Neel, to everybody helped me to put that, to Pero, to Rimjim, to every single designer I wrote to, and I sent some textile to of Baluchar. They converted into the most amazing clothing. So I was trying to get the maximum number of students to come and see this possibility, because the next generation is the generation that is going to take it forward. The government of West Bengal supported me greatly. Tantuj, their organization, came in the picture. They brought Weaver Service Center on board. They became our technical coordinators. And I think we did a fantastic teamwork. And we got 12 designs and 12 looms started in Bishnupur, got the carding, the cards cut, and the government support and all of it. And at the end of this, the government actually converted one of their shops, which is in Park Street, which is the main area, to be a Baluchari shop. So an entire shop was dedicated to Baluchars. And that was what was amazing. I wish that we could have continued, because we were not able to continue for whatever reasons at the same impact or same intensity. Had we been able to continue, we would have managed to get scale. This demands that respect. The sari really demands that respect. So the older motifs had all the socio-political, British, zamindar, all of those influences, from boats to trains to people to hookahs to women smoking hookahs to carriages to all of it that you saw, to the temple architecture, to all of it that you saw around in those times, to the influence of the British, to the influence of the zamindars, to all of it. And in 1955, when they wanted to do the Festival of India and they came to Bengal and they couldn't manage, they went back to the famous weaver Kalu Hafiz in Banaras, and that's where they wove the Baluchar. So now we find that the Baluchar tradition exists not only in West Bengal but also in Banaras. But in Banaras, it is doesn't have that absolute, if you go to see all the museum saris, and the flow and the feel and the delicacy and the detailing, you will find the difference. I mean, Bengal is far ahead. Had it continued to keep that focus, it is far ahead, because the silk that was originally woven is still being grown in Bengal. So the Malda silk still has even if it's a very small silk industry, it died over the years because it was not required. There was no demand for it, but it's revived and it's got people making the Malda silk. So if we do get government intervention, the possibility is huge. The 70 or 80 weavers that exist in Bishnupur today could all be weaving not saris which they sell for 3,000 to 5,000 rupees, but what today the Baluchar shop sells for between 25,000 and 75,000. So that's the kind of value that this textile can add, and that's the kind of value that it can bring to to Bengal. And all the brides should be wearing the Baluchar instead of wearing the Jamdani and Jamdani is fine, I can understand it, but why Banaras? So they started using gold and they called it Swarno Churi. So in between, the Baluchar became popular to be worn in weddings, but by the cousins and the sisters and the other people who are not the main bride. And they were adding gold to it and they called it Swarno Churi. So it was, it went to different kind of levels, but it was never researched and taken to the level that we took it to by being persistent, consistent, committed, and by having the belief that our weavers can do it. So that's the Baluchar story about 2 years ago.
So if we come to Bengal today, would we still be able to access some of these old motifs? Are they still being made? Is it? Yeah.
Should I show you a couple which has been done by by West Bengal government? But what has happened is that now the guidance of the Weaver Service Center is no longer there, and they haven't taken our guidance either. So what is going wrong is the colors. What is going wrong is the balance. So they have to understand that a true collaboration is where the government can bring scalability, not business. If government gets into the business of it, it becomes very difficult.
Correct.
But if they can bring scalability and they can trust people like us and the Weaver Service Centers and their design teams, and if they can study what is already in our museums and just first start with the basic reproduction. The innovation will come once you have your basics right. Correct. And your basics strong. Then whether it's a calligraphy or it's an iconic multi-icon sari, or it's a multi-motif sari, or if it's whatever it is, that practice, if it comes, then the variations can happen. Correct. But your strength lies in building that foundation once again. The documentation, the archiving, the CFCs, the common facilitation centers that need to be there, the library that needs to be there, the card cutting. Today, for them to cut cards, they have to come to Fulia. So obviously, when they come to cut cards in Fulia, the shape of the kalka, which is a tradition in a particular manner in Vishnupur, for example, right?
Yeah.
It will not be the same when you come to Fulia or to Shantipur. So their computers and systems are not there. Their libraries are not functioning. Their training center to do this is not functioning. The looms are not upgraded to that level. So it's not really gone the way I would have liked it to go. But I hope that post this interview, I'm contacted once again and this bridge is gapped. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this interview, is to put that message across that there's so much possibility. Why can't we work together? Why can't we work beyond religion and beyond borders and beyond politics to actually work at the grassroots, where they are so simple, but they are excellent in their technique and their knowledge, that it can be such a good marriage if we bring our energies together. This is that famous 1.5 meter palla. This is a museum design, but if you can see what I mean by the coloring, so if this falsa is being used, then the coloring and the balance of the weight of the colors has gone wrong in the palla. Okay, it's okay to do the 1.5 meters also and do a reproduction, but the colors need to be reproduced. And the detail, can you see that the kalka's detail has gone off? It could be a Banarasi kalka. It doesn't have to be an authentic, there's not an authentic kalka from an old sari. This is another sari which they've done, where the elephant motif is there, but you can see that the elephants have got elongated. The elephants have got, and the coloring. So what has happened is that this blue color, this turquoise color, is not being balanced in equal thing in the sari. So it shows a square, patchy kind of thing. So this is from what the government is continuing to make with the cluster, and this is what Banaras has made. Now you will understand that Banaras Baluchari is heavier, but it has a very good sense of balance and matching. একটু পিছনে যাও, সোজা করো, আমার হাতটা নিচে, তোমার উপরে। হ্যাঁ, না সোজা নেই। হ্যাঁ। So do you understand that? And see that the horses are perfect. The size. Yeah. And see their kalkas, the detailing in their this is see the motif. So what happens is that we feel that if Banaras can do it and they do still have the jala, we should have them come and train our weavers and have a collaborative effort.
सबसे पहले तो हम लोग जाले में डिजाइन बनाते हैं, डिजाइन ड्रा करते हैं, और उसके बाद फिर उसको जाले में वीव करते हैं और वीव करने के बाद जाला यहाँ पे लूम पे लाते हैं, इसको हम जाला बोलते हैं। डिज़ाइन कपड़े पे उकेरने के लिए हमें जाला का माध्यम का इस्तेमाल करना पड़ता है। ये जाला एक मैकेनिज़्म है डिज़ाइन को सिल्क पे वीव करने का। तो पहले क्या था कि पहले जाला से पहले जो था 300 साल पहले, तो वो लोग जो है नीचे ताना, नीचे ये ताना बोलते हैं इसको, ताना के नीचे ड्राइंग पेपर को रख के और वो कढ़ाई करते थे। जहाँ से वो लाइन क्रॉस कर रही है, कहाँ पे कौन सा रंगों का उपयोग करना है, वो ताना के नीचे वो डिज़ाइन लगाकर उसको कढ़ाई करते थे और उस तरह से बुनाई होता था। लेकिन वो बहुत स्लो प्रोडक्शन था उसका, जो है बहुत धीमा काम होता था। तो इसलिए लोगों ने जाला ईजाद किया। ये डिज़ाइन का पहला पिक है, इसको हम खेवा बोलते हैं अपने यहाँ। तो ये पहला है, दूसरा, तीसरा, ऐसे ये सीक्वेंस है, इसका लीज है ताकि धागा नीचे ऊपर ना हो, इसका क्रमबद्ध बना रहे। और इसको नथिया बोलते हैं। और इसमें अगर 5 रंगों का हम यूज़ कर रहे हैं तो 5 रंग का अलग अलग धागा एक साथ उसको हम बांधते हैं। यहाँ पे हम 2 धागा इसलिए है कि एक मीनाकारी का है और एक हमारा डिज़ाइन के लिए, तो 2 धागा यहाँ पे है। कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि डिज़ाइन में 3 कलर हो, 4 कलर हो, 5 कलर हो, 10 कलर हो, 20 कलर हो, तो वहाँ पे वो हम एक जगह पर उतना धागा बांध देंगे और जो डिज़ाइन का होगा, जो कि सबसे लास्ट में वो उसको बुनेंगे, सबसे बड़ा रखते हैं, फिर उससे छोटा, उससे छोटा, उससे छोटा, जो नंबर पहला आता है वो सबसे पहले रखते हैं, सबसे छोटा रखते हैं, ताकि ऐसे हम खींचे तो पहला वाला पहले आ जाए, पकड़ के हम उसको बुन दें। 150 साल पहले ये इसी टेक्निक से वो काम वहाँ पे करते थे। धीरे धीरे चेंजेस हुआ, बदलाव होते गया, लोगों का इंटरेस्ट इसमें ख़त्म होता गया, लेकिन आज भी हम लोग इसमें काम कर रहे हैं, लगे हुए हैं। ये हमारी परंपरा है, ट्रेडिशन है और ख़ानदानी परंपरा है। और हमारा ये जो विरासत है, विरासत मुझे मिला है, तो इस विरासत को बचा के रखने का जिम्मेदारी हमारा है, हमारे परिवार का है। हम लोग 4 पीढ़ियों से इस काम को आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं और मैं उम्मीद करता हूँ कि आगे भी इस काम को हम बढ़ाएंगे, अपने बच्चों को सिखाएंगे और इस काम को आगे हम बढ़ाते रहेंगे।
And see, I had these samplers made, and I tried to make it in Bishnupur, but it didn't work. But I made all the motifs. These are all different motifs, but I made it in Banaras. So you can see I got each motif: the woman smoking the hookah, to the Raja smoking the hookah, the zamindar, to kalka dekho. So different motifs dekho. So what we did is that we documented everything. See the different kalkas. So we got it done. Okay, then there's another one here. So each one is, so we really invested, but there's a point up to which people like us can only get that much scale. Yeah, see, we have almost 15, 16 different bhutas that we've sampled. So these were all samplers so that our students, when they come, they don't have to open 100 saris. They could open 20 samplers. So these are all borders, all possible borders of Baluchar. So these samplers we made so that 100, instead of seeing 100 saris, they could see 5 saris, but look at all the samplers, and from the samplers get that inspiration, and then they could scan it, and then they could mix and match it and give it to the weaver. And it's so much is possible. If you give them 100 designs at a design center and tell the students, okay, 3 months in internship, we need from these 100 a permutation combination. Can you imagine what they could do?
Correct.
Yeah. So this is what I hope that we're able to do in the near future. Because doing exhibitions and doing archiving and doing publications is great for long term. Yeah. But the current situation, the whole thing is that it must inspire the next generation, and it must give impetus to the current, whatever is happening in the current level at the village or at the town or wherever, the weaver centers. That's the only thing in which I think I didn't do well. I could have done better.
And you can't do it alone also. So you need more hands. You definitely need interventions from government bodies and things like that.
Yes.
Because one person alone can make a difference, which you clearly have, but to make a movement, you need people, right? So I hope people are inspired.
And actually the scalability, you see, you have to continue to progress, to continue to improve, because the market is moving so fast that they need to, and you can't get people just to go off the radar. So you can't say Weaver Service Center, now we don't need you anymore because you've got 12 designs, ye 12 designs hum log ko chalega. वो नहीं हो सकता है because it's a continuous churning. It's a continuous process. So either you just stick to doing archiving and documentation and publications and seminars and a nice exhibition and say namaste, or you take it to the next level where you actually make a difference, not only by inspiring people, but giving them the platform to actually produce those textiles. Actually go from 300 counts muslin to the next 400, from 400 to 500. If they could do it then, why can't we do it now? So it's just that. It's just that I feel that it's been the most amazing experience after seeing the kind of level of expertise that we have, not only in this state, but in this country.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Abnormal Presence Touring Talkies. Do stay tuned on our Facebook and Instagram page for updates on future episodes. Do leave your comments, suggestions, and feedback on this episode right below the episode. Thank you very much.